Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Joseph Clough, and this is episode 528. And today I'd like to talk to you about ultimately validation, purpose, and also community. I think these are the three vital things that we miss in life. But once we start to apply them and start to master them, in other words, you're going to see a huge shift, whether it be in your health, your relationship, your career, your business, because each one of them will give you that extra bit of fuel. It will cause you to kind of go, look, okay, if I master these three things, I know if I do it consistently, I'm going to get better results. I'm going to change my circumstance, in other words. So let's go into the first one. That's going to be our validation. In a world that we live in, it's very hard to ask for our own self-validation. We usually dismiss ourselves. Even to the point someone can say the most wonderful, nice things to us, but we can just dismiss it. That's okay. And I think that's wrong. It's not egotistical to accept validation from others. If they say it, we should receive it, because otherwise we're not just dismissing ourselves, we're actually dismissing them. And if you're like most people, we like to be seen, we like to be heard, we like to be felt. So if someone is saying something nice to us, a compliment, then accept it. They said it for a reason. So we have that external validation, which we can dismiss. But even more than that, we have our self-validation, the internal validation, which we rarely ever accept. The validation, well, actually, what we usually do is this. We usually validate all the negative things about us. We validate, oh, I'm a bad person, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of that great relationship or that career, that promotion, to start my own business. As I think about myself, I have all these validations as to why I cannot be who I want to be. We dismiss the good validation and we automatically go to that validation of the reasons as to why we are like we are, or the reasons as to why you cannot achieve what you truly desire. And I'm not saying you do this consciously, because there's a lot of unconscious stuff here. There's a lot of unconscious platforms and systems and strategies and these little mind viruses that we have for ourselves, which can be installed from a very young age. It could be from a significant emotional event. It could be numerous events. But that validation of, I cannot change, I'm always going to be like this, I am not enough to go for what I want, that's going to lock you down. And more often than not, it is unconscious. And I'll tell you exactly why. If you could consciously change right now, you would do. You'd click your fingers, you go, hey, I validate myself. In a good way. But if you cannot, it must mean your unconscious mind is running that thought process. You may consciously will it to be a good validation, but your unconscious mind will just go, hey, what about this? Do you remember that time you went through that situation and you totally messed it up? Do you remember that time you started that other business and it failed? Do you remember when that person said, you weren't enough? It's kind of true. Your unconscious mind can just leap into that negative validation. Now, I want us to be very clear on this though, because although we're saying it's a negative validation, which it is, right? We're not validating our good stuff, but we're validating all our negativity. The key reason as to why your unconscious mind does this is it's a form of protection. It stops you go for your dreams. It stops you looking for the solution. It stops you because you might fail. You might get hurt. It might happen again and again and again. So your unconscious mind's like, I want to get out of pain. I don't want you to be in pain. So it's going to come up with all these reasons why you shouldn't go for what you want, because it does not want you to get hurt. And your unconscious mind is here to protect us. It can be a little bit silly sometimes, but the intention's pure. It's like a phobia. Phobias aren't helpful. In fact, they can be very, very dangerous for people. You know, driving phobia, and you're driving, it's not the best thing to do. It could be dangerous. But the intent behind that behavior is positive. It feels we might get hurt. So it gives us all these signals of fear, worry, doubt, and everything else in between to stop us progress. It causes us to go, look, don't do that. Just don't go for your dreams. And then we get stuck in that cycle. So that is why we go down that negative validation of our present situation, or the negative validation of as to why we cannot change. And like I said, it could be an event, someone could have told us something, and we accepted it as truth. No one got in our mind and kind of did that. Unconsciously, we accepted that belief. Where it be through all those circumstances, which was our evidence to go, this is why I can't do what I'm doing. There's why I can't go for my dreams. So that validation of why I should stay stuck is created. So it's interesting that not many people feel comfortable about validating themselves, but they do it all the time in the negative. It's okay to do it in a negative way, but not in a positive way. Now, another reason why we don't really validate ourselves in the positive is we do feel like it could be egotistical. We do feel like we shouldn't share our celebrations. So for example, in my program, every group coaching call that we have, I ask for celebrations. And that's going to go to community as well, the last step I'm going to talk about. We actually ask for celebrations. In fact, if you were watching this live on the video, every time there's a celebration, we like to go crazy hard in our celebrations. We want to make sure that we know it's a safe place to express yourself, to express your wins, because that means you do feel a sense of community and belonging. So we've got to get into that mindset. And it's hard at first because we usually dismiss and go for the negative ones. So the first thing is, we've got to decide upon it. Now, one of the questions here is, so how do you change our validation into the positive? And that is a great question. That's always like the big thing, right? How do I change? And there's going to be varying levels to this. There's stuff you can do by yourself. There's things you can do with people. In other words, finding a very, very good hypnotherapist or coach or mentor or something like that. You can use, obviously, the hypnosis app that I have, which is a free hypnosis.app. But the key is to figure out that negative core issue which creates the negative validation. Usually we work on symptoms. Like I can promise you, so many people just work on anxiety. And yeah, it's good to listen to it, one of my hypnosis sessions on anxiety. Of course it is. But sometimes for someone, that core issue might actually be something else entirely different, which creates the anxiety. So we've got to think about it. Like we've got to go, okay, so what is the reasoning behind it? And it could be that first event. It really could be that decision that we made about ourselves, which then creates that negative validation of our circumstance or the lack of celebration. But the first key is to go, okay, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to decide and declare that I'm ready to change my experience. I refuse to allow the past to dictate where I'm heading. So in this moment, I'm going to start to become conscious. I'm going to notice when that negative self-validation comes into play. So in other words, when it happens, the environment that it happens, the times that it happens, the triggers, in other words, and be conscious of those. Take note of them so you can actually start to interrupt that pattern. At the very least, it will kind of give you an inside look as to the unconscious process. We don't know what we don't know, right? Funny but true. We don't know what we don't know until we start to recognize it and notice the pattern, notice the stories that we tell ourselves, notice the themes, because I always find it interesting. What we do in one thing, we tend to do in the everything. So it may be a recurring theme in your life that you weren't aware of. So we've got to wake up. We've got to become conscious. We've got to be aware of what our unconscious processes are, or processes are happening beneath the surface. We've got to make them conscious. That's the waking up aspect. That's the taking responsibility and then coming up with an intervention of that issue. Usually, like the way that I work on root cause. So when people apply for my program, for example, my system is there to find the hidden unconscious root cause and then educate the unconscious mind that there's a safer way of being. So regardless of my program, that's what you've got to think about. How can I educate my unconscious mind that there's another way of being safe? Because that negative self-validation is a protective mechanism at its core intention. The behavior spirals out of control. That's what we don't like, the spiraling out. But we want to make sure that we understand what is happening and evolving the unconscious mind. Because the pitfall that we fall into is we go from, I hate this issue. I hate this experience. I hate this anxiety. Now, the nature of doing so is actually sending hate to yourself. And even deeper than that, to your unconscious mind, because it's running it. Now, can you educate anyone when you're speaking hate to them? Think about that. If there was a child and you wanted to educate that child, is it better to shout or have hate in your words or in your communication, or anger or frustration? Of course it's not, right? It's better to be able to approach it where it lives and to connect with it. I always see, and the reason why I said that is because I really think when I do my work with my clients, it's almost like we see the unconscious mind as a misguided child. They usually try to please us, but they don't do it all the time. They might draw you that beautiful painting, but it happens to be on your brand new painted wall. Intention was nice to be able to draw you a painting, but the application, not so much. So we've got to educate it and realize that we're out of rapport with our unconscious mind. We're out of rapport. There was a very, very famous hypnotist called Dr. Milton Erickson. And he said this: patients are patients, or you could say my clients are my clients, because they're out of rapport with themselves. In other words, their unconscious mind. They've been so programmed, I'm kind of ad-libbing this bit, but they've been so programmed by the outside world that now we're out of rapport with ourselves. And then we start to hate upon ourselves, that negative self-validation, consciously and unconsciously. And before we know it, we're more conflicted because the divide between our conscious and unconscious mind is so separated because we communicate in a negative way. So how can we bridge that gap? Well, we say it in such a wonderful way to our unconscious mind and start to educate it to the success that we desire. We've got to really get in rapport with our unconscious mind. And there are many processes which you can do that. Like I said, the hypnosis, where it be my program, where it be someone else's. I don't care as long as you change. That's my main deal. Like, it's not going to change my life significantly if someone doesn't work with me. But I do feel like if you change with someone else, that's going to make me feel super happy. So whatever the solution is for you, you find that solution. But going back to the point, is usually we validate our negative aspects of ourselves, the inner critic of ourselves, the hate or the dislike of ourselves, but we never really validate the good things. Whether it be from a friend who says, you're such a kind person, we can dismiss it. Whether it be from ourselves. Unconsciously, consciously, we will start to dismiss ourselves. So we got to make a decision. We got to decide that actually I'm going to make a priority, and this adds on to that question, well, how do we change it? Make it a priority to validate yourself. Every day. Celebrate your wins. You might not celebrate it to other people because, society goes, oh, that's egotistical. Or who are you to celebrate? But at the very least, celebrate with yourself. Did something good that day? Honor it. Honor yourself. When you honor yourself, you're actually honoring your unconscious mind. And they did a study once. I know we're going kind of deep into this, but they did a study where it was about education. You could say it's really the moral of the story is positive reinforcement. But they did this experiment, and I believe it was with dolphins. And every time the dolphin would do a good trick, they'd give it a fish. They didn't punish or anything like that, just give a fish when it did something good. And then, guess what happened? Well, the dolphins wanted to do more. They did bigger and better tricks. Sometimes they didn't get a fish for that. So then they went a little bit harder. There was no negative feedback. It was all positive. Now, the reason why I say that for your unconscious mind is this. If you honor yourself in the things that what you are good at, or the gratitude of what and who you are and the things you did well, it changes the rapport with your unconscious mind. Now your unconscious mind is going to do what? It's going to try to please you. It's going to do more of the same. We're not shining a light on the negative validation. Now we're shining a light on the good validation of the things that we did. You may journal that. You may just write it down. If you're going to write it, make sure you use a pen because it's a kinesthetic thing rather than just doing it on your phone. But regardless, celebrating your wins or the things that you did well is going to start to change the tide of your transformation. You're going to start to honor yourself and the good things you did, and that's good and great. Like I said, in my program, we celebrate. We actually encourage people to celebrate, and guess what happens? Everyone's like, oh, that's fantastic. And do you know what else that does? Gives permission for the other people to do the exact same. They see someone who's celebrating, they've done an achievement, and now they think it's possible too. You see, when we celebrate the things that we do good at, even if you don't verbalize it, you're going to show up different every day, and therefore you are the example of what can be done. You are convincing people subconsciously of the things you do well. So know that we've got to have that validation. You've got to build up that skill set. Whether it be, like I said, working with someone, whether it be just doing it by yourself, either way, that's what we've got to do. That's one part of it. So I hope that's helpful on the validation side. The next aspect, this is going to be our purpose side of things. Now, I'm not saying our purpose has to change the world, but it's just got to be living in purpose. What is our purpose for the day? What is our purpose for this week? What is the purpose of doing what I'm doing? Understanding your why, your reasons. Most of the time, people go through life doing the same thing over and over again, and they don't really realize why they're doing it. They just keep on going through that same old experience over and over again. But we've got to go to the point where we're like, okay, I'm going to be conscious once again of the reasons why I want X, Y, Z. What are the reasons? If you want to discover more about your purpose, and like I said, it doesn't have to be like changing the world or anything like that, but just living a more fulfilling life, is to consider your values. What's important to you? Now, what do I mean by your why, your reasons, and your values? Unconsciously, we are generating a perception of our reality, right? Our story kind of goes into our reality. It creates our reality to a degree, subjectively, right? Now, one of the filters of the unconscious mind would be something like belief, right? So what our beliefs will dictate how and what we do. Other aspects would be like things like memories, the decisions we've made. But one of the big ones is our values. The values which are important to us. For some people, our value could be family. And therefore, one of your main focuses is having a family or being family orientated. Other people could be like a money value. So that maybe they're highly orientated toward money. But then we can go deeper into things. Like maybe let's take an example of a career. Right? You want to figure out what you want to be doing for a career. And you can do this for relationships, you can do it for anything. But just as an example, we would go and ask ourselves a question like, well, what's important to me about career? And then like your intuition, your words just come out and you go, well, success. So you write down success. Okay, what else is important to you about career? Flexibility. Flexibility and freedom. Okay, I'm going to write down flexibility and freedom. Okay, great. What else is important to you about career? Oh, money. I need money. I can't do it for free. I got bills to pay. I've got things I want to do. I want to be able to contribute to charities, to whatever. Okay, write down money in this example. What else? Well, let's see. It could be working with people. Okay, great. Write that down. And after a while, we're going to find out all the things which are important to us. Now, you could do the exact same thing about relationships. What's important to you about relationships? Okay, it could be love. Okay, I'm going to write that down. Intimacy. I'm going to write that down. It could be sex. I'm going to write that one down. Like, you really come up with all the things which are important to you about relationships. Now, you may then look back in your career or past relationships and notice which values weren't met. And then you go, oh my goodness, that's why my relationship failed, because we missed intimacy. That was a higher value for me. So therefore, that's why. It could be like the career, well, I didn't get paid much, and money's kind of important to me. Or maybe it was teamwork, but I was working alone. So we're now understanding our unconscious. And there'll be a hierarchy as well. And we can go deeper into that very briefly, but once you've got your list of your values, and it's important, remember, this is the purpose aspect, we would then put it in a hierarchy of most important to least important, although still important, but like the hierarchy of it, and therefore you can then see which is most important to you. So then, let's just say we have that. We've got our list of values, which is really our reasons, the things that we enjoy, the things that we need. Then we've got to live by those, or look for those things or people, the things that we do, whether it be health, relationship, career, and all those kind of things. We've got to try to figure out how can we act out our highest values. Guess what's going to happen? You're going to actually be happier. Because now you're understanding the things that make you tick. You're understanding what makes you feel more purposeful. So now you're more energized by it. So we're decoding our unconscious programming of our values. Now, slight disclaimer here, without going all technical and all those things. Some of those values that we have may be negatively charged. Money could be very, very high. But if the money value is charged with like beliefs of money is the root of all evil, feelings of scarcity, that's going to be an issue because now we're operating out of that negative. So you want to make sure you work upon clearing those up ultimately. But that's kind of like going deep into the weeds there for another day. We can go deeper into that another time. But just be conscious of that. We want to recognize our purpose in our values. What motivates us? What's important to us? So now if we add the first one, which we briefly talked, or kind of not briefly at all, but was really going into self-validation. Now we're going into the purpose. Add those two together, and then we're really starting to be happy. But then I notice another thing which really happens is ultimately the community aspect. You see, you could be validating yourself, you could be really living in purpose, in your passions, doing the things that you love, but if there's no sense of community, and you may really get this one, where you feel like you don't belong, or you don't feel as if you're connected with people. And they could be really good and great people, by the way. I mean, not always, but they could be like our childhood friends. They could be our family, our co-workers, but sometimes they won't get another aspect to us. Sometimes they will, of course, but sometimes even though we have that setup, let alone if we have a negative set of people in our life, we have a lack of community. That lack of community will make us feel like we are alone. And therefore it stifles our progress. It causes us to think it's kind of a lonely journey getting to where I really want to. So if you recall back to the beginning, I said about self-validation, celebrating, and in my system, we always celebrate our wins and our successes because it creates self-validation. So aligning yourself up with a community who gets you, who has similar values, our purpose, as well as who can but can validate us, encourage us, and keep us accountable, because that's important too. We're going to then be lifted up. There's a famous quote that you are the sum of the 5 closest people in your life. What that really means is if you are hanging around with, say, 5 very, very negative people, always seeing the negative, always having fear and scarcity, you're more likely going to take that on because they're in your vicinity, they're in your circle, and therefore bring you down into it. You kind of just get pulled into it. Now, if we change your frame of reference, if let's say it was about business and you surrounded yourself with very successful business people with similar values, what's going to happen? You're going to just pull all that in. You're going to be just lifted up with that energy. So it's important to know that who you are listening to, who you're surrounding yourself with, that can keep you in check, where you can bounce off ideas, where you feel heard, and you have a sense of belonging. Now, how do we do that? Well, there are thankfully technology and like the internet, it is easier to be more connected with other people. And I don't mind if it's like meetup.com, when you find people of similar interest. That means you're adding more people into your life, even if there are like your good friends and family, or even some negative people that you just don't want to let go of. You're adding on the weighing scales more positive people to make you feel better. So that sense of community gives you a sense of belonging. And if you have that sense of belonging, with understanding why you do what you do, your values, your purpose, with that self-validation of celebrating your wins and being proud of it and taking other people's compliments as truth because it's true for why they said it. So regardless of your beliefs about yourself, if someone says you're a kind person, take it. Even if you don't believe it, because someone did believe in it. That was their truth, and you're dismissing them. And that doesn't feel good to feel dismissed, as I'm sure you could imagine. So I really feel as if you were to operate and make those 3 things a priority this whole week, the next month, this year, you're going to live a happier, wealthier, more abundant life, because you're now understanding the nature of your unconscious mind and you're getting more connected with rapport-wise with your unconscious mind. So I hope you enjoyed that. Now, of course, if you want to be able to go into it deeper, if you have that imposter syndrome or inner critic, and you did want to potentially want to work with me, just go to josephclough.info/power. Or if you just want to stick to the app, go to freehypnosis.app, and then you can just listen to the Hypnosis app. You get all these audios. Like I said, we're 528 episodes, or this will be when it gets released. And if you're listening to the podcast, you know that it is this one. Then use the Hypnosis app. It's really powerful. And if you could leave a rating and review, I'd greatly appreciate it, even because it gives evidence to other people. Like, that's that community, right? That's feeling validated by someone else's opinion. So you can actually do good in the world, and it'll obviously be very great for me as well if you would go ahead and do that. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I do appreciate all the very kind comments coming in. I do really appreciate you in every way. Good. So thank you, Claudia, as well, saying you loved the Be Your Potential, which is my book, which was published by Hay House, and it's also on Audible if you want to get the audio version, and that's me speaking it, and that means you can get the Be Your Potential audiobook. So I hope you enjoyed this live stream, and if you're listening to this on the podcast and you want to be able to get access to the live experience, and on other future ones, I will be doing more kind of Q&A. When we did answer what I saw, most of the questions, unless they just escaped me, but I think I covered most of them. But you can actually get notified of the let's see if I can find what we need. Like, for example, on YouTube, if you hit the subscribe button, you can do a little thumbs up, you click the bell, the 3 things, and that just means you'll get notified when I'm going live. And I'm trying to plan it out a lot more, in times giving you like a bigger window to know that I'm going live, and I will plan to do an actual schedule. But if you want to get in on that, just go to youtube.com/Joseph Clough, and that way you can go ahead and do that. So Joseph and CLOUGH. So with that, my wonderful friends, I will leave this episode for you. I wish you the very best in every single way. And just know, whatever you think you are, you're always more. I always honestly believe in you, and sometimes that's all we need. But seriously, really go all in on the validation. Go in on the purpose, the reasons why, the things which are important to us. And on top of that, get in a community where you feel a sense of belonging, because that will give you permission to shine. That's what I really love about community. They give you permission to shine because they want you to shine. They want you to fly and get to where you want to be in a quick, profound way. So, with that, my friends, I look forward to speaking to you on a future episode. Many thanks and goodbye.